WOWT6. This is Heartland Focus.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Heartland Focus. My name is Tim Clark, your host. As you can see, I always start with my mask on just to really reinforce that we're still in the midst of this insidious virus that we must stop. And so part of stopping that is really trying to practice social distancing, wear your mask, wash your hands, and get tested, because as we know that this virus shows no symptoms most often. And so the only way you know is to go get tested. And so there's plenty of outlets and places that you can get tested. Charles Drew Community Health Center, One World, a lot of call your primary doctor, but just really seek to understand and to be in the know. So I would really offer and challenge you to seek the knowledge as it relates to getting the vaccine. Personally, I chose to get the Moderna, and so I have both shots, and that's a personal decision, but I would really hope that you would seek the knowledge from reliable sources, the CDC, talk to your doctor before you make a decision, especially because there's so much misinformation that's out there. So really make sure you seek out a trusted source for that information as you look at making a decision if you should take the vaccine or not. This coming Thursday, we have Moving People to Action town hall meeting. We're going to focus on minority health, racism, and police reform. And so we have master herbalist Russell Harrison is going to be joining us. Also from the state, Josie Rodriguez. We're really talking about what's happening with minority health. And we have some other special guests that's going to be on that platform, Moving People to Action. So make sure you go like our page, visit our website, mp2action.com. That's mp2action.com. Facebook is Moving People, 2 Action, Moving People to Action. I hope you join us this Thursday, 7 p.m. Central Time, Moving People to Action. Conversations that we must have to empower people, to inform people, so they can make the decisions how they will participate and ultimately move to action. With that, I want to transition into our guest, my man Ricky Smith. He's the director for 360 Empowerment Network. Welcome to Heartland Focus, Ricky.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, I wanted to I want to just start off apologizing because we chose a kind of a heavy subject, and I know we're not going to have enough time, so we're going to have you come back. So I just want to get a commitment up front, Ricky, that we're going to start the conversation and we're going to finish it, because this is a conversation that we must have when we're talking about police reform, racism, and some of the things that's at the root cause of some of these pain points that's taking place in our country right now. So to get us started, Ricky, 360, what is it? What's the work, and what have you guys been doing, and how it's connected to what's happening in front of us right now when it comes to the conversation, discussion around police reform?
Absolutely. So Unwall 360 is an initiative of the Empowerment Network with Willie Barney. I took this off about 14 years ago to address some of the things that were going on in our city as it pertains to gun violence, homicides, gang-related incidents throughout our community. And it's really wrapped around a couple of different strategies and best practices in order to work together with law enforcement, first responders in our community to kind of help curb some of these things and provide additional opportunities just period, for people in the community to make change and be very, very intentional about building relationships with law enforcement so that way we can be one of those conduits in between community and law enforcement.
So when you look at the work, Ricky, what's working? I mean, what part of it that you can say, hey, looking out, there's a lot of agitation, tension going on in this country, but I too believe that Omaha. I'm not saying we're perfect, but I think we're doing a lot of right things, and talk about some of those things that you think that in light of what you're seeing out there that Omaha we're doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Willie was able to do over 14 years ago was to get the right stakeholders at the table, talk about how we can address some of these things and build authentic relationships with law enforcement. And so we have been able to establish ourselves as one of the evidence-based best practices out there when it comes to community relations and police. And so it's all about just that communication component and listening to the people. What is it that we can do in order to make change? One of the biggest things back then they heard and could see was that our people were underemployed, not working, hanging out, and that's how the trouble started. And so they were able to program, they were able to develop Step Up Omaha and hire teams during the summer and provide them an employment opportunity in order to go forward and kind of curb some of the negatives that were happening in the community. And when you look at the stats numbers, gun violence and gun incidents actually went down during these employment times. So it's just a way of engaging the community and employing our young people, then also building those, say, authentic relationships with law enforcement.
Now, one of the things you talked about, Ricky, you said, and I agree with you. I think part of it is communication, but having the right people at the table. Talk about that table a little bit, because sometimes people are like, well, wait a minute, you invite me to the table, who's at the table that makes up that meaningful force or collaborative effort that our community, folks may be watching this and they say, well, okay, that table, it's a good table, good representation.
And the great thing about it is everybody's invited to the table. If you have ideas or you want to be a change agent, then you are always invited to the table. But we started off with just sitting with our different police chiefs at the time and talking with them on how we can be a resource and kind of support them in the things that they're doing in the community. You have other nonprofit organizations who are direct service providers to our young people. We have Urban League, Hope Center, Boys and Girls Club, those kind of entities who are firsthand with our students, and then also being able to partner with the schools and the school district on providing some opportunities to provide one-on-one and group services to those students while they're in school or they're out of school, being able to access them on a regular basis. And as well as the mayor's office and being able to work with some of our local legislatures as well on policy and things that we need to get in the books in order to make definite change, constant change, and then also sustainability. People who are able to provide some funding to help us continue to provide these resources to our young people, to our kids who were working during the summer. So it's a round table, a big table, everybody invited. And then of course our community members. We have just a great working relationship with U-Turn, who does intervention and prevention as well. New partners are with the FBI, who just want to continue to actively engage. The sheriff's office. Wayne Hudson does a lot of things in the community. So we've been really busy in just trying to make sure that we invite everybody to the table to be a part of the solution.
And so that sounds like a big table. And it sounds, sounds like everybody's eating. Everybody's eating pretty good, Now, when you look at it, we're going to take a break. But I want you to think about really the work and really some things that we can talk about of one, how the community can help, but two, the work that needs to be done. How do we make good, better, great? What's that progression? Because you would agree, and I'm going to have the chief of police on, I believe he's coming on next week, that, we're not going to raise our hand and say, hey, we're done, we're the best. But let's think about after we come back from break, Ricky, how do we take good to great and move up that ladder in terms of make things better for what's happening here in the greater Omaha area. We're going to take a short break, and coming back, our guest, we're going to talk about really what does police reform looks like for the greater Omaha area, and really how do we truly begin to improve community police relations. Stay with me. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Heartland Focus. My guest is Ricky Smith, the director of 360. Ricky, so, thanks for being here again, man, and thanks for the work. As we look at police reform, and to some degree, I think it's rooted in institutional racism is a culture that I think we have to begin to look at how do we break through and really rebuild a culture that's driven and based on the foundation of what? Accountability. In your estimation of the work how do we begin to move in that direction, and what does that look like?
It's really humanitarian, being able to work together as a community and knowing that our first responders are out there every day to provide a service to us. But when you look at policy reform, or when you look at police reform, a lot of it is really policy reform, and what are the best things or what are the best practices out there that are being utilized and what are on the books and what things need to be changed. Just talking recently with a couple of the officers, they said they look at other agencies and how they operate, and some things are just common sense. They just don't work. They're old and they need to be adjusted and amended. And so here in Omaha, we have a very unique situation where we have a 14-year relationship with law enforcement through the Empowerment Network and Omaha 360. And so we've been having those conversations for a long time, and those changes have been implemented. How there is a need for diversity in the department, and recruiting and building our own kind of vehicle for getting people interested in working for the police department who are from our community. Having those conversations, not just when something flares up or is negative, but just positive conversations and actively engaging families. The outreach that's being done is really important when you have programs like the Boys and Girls Club, Hope Center, U-Turn, who are reaching out to families, and then later on they get additional supports from by getting involved with PACE, or they have one-on-one mentoring through Midland's mentoring partnership. So there's a lot of things that are going on and have to be done and have to continue to happen in order for us to see that reform. And it's really about family engagement. Our officers know who needs the work, the help, who needs that outreach, and they provide those names to some of the sensitive partners who do that one-on-one engagement. So we know what it is we can do in order to get in front of some of the things. The climate is usually pretty calm, and there's always work being done behind the scenes. Yeah.
So that's a good point. Good points. So when you look at your thought in terms of just should part of this police reform, should we seek to have more officers that reflect the community they're serving? I mean, how and that one kind of speak on that, and then two, this whole thing of and you spoke to policies. I think it's got to be driven by policies. We got to create the policies that will change the culture, and sometimes you try to do it opposite. You got a culture that's been deeply rooted. How do you unroot that culture? But talk to that a little bit and hold the things about, because you could really create a policy that mimics communities. And I think too often we have too many officers that don't look nothing like the community they're serving. Not seeing that white folks, black folks can't serve opposite communities. But I think it's just with the situation we're at, where trust has been broken for the most part. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I think, how do we begin to rebuild that? It's like a good marriage or relationship. When you break trust, dude, you got to do some work. You may have to sleep on Ricky. May have to sleep on the couch for a few days or weeks.
Yeah. And so when you have a relationship, what builds trust is communication, right?
Right.
And so it has to be an authentic relationship. We got to have integrity with that. And so when things happen in our city, our police chief and first responders, they get out in front of it. They get on camera and say, hey, this is what happened. This is how we're going to operate. These things are going on. There's always a policy in place. There's always a plan in place going forward. And then there's always stakeholders who are brought to the table to say, okay, what is it that you see? What is it that you think we need? How can we better serve? A couple of years ago, there was a survey that the Empowerment Network did that said we want our police officers to have body cameras. And so now that is just part of serving the community. They all have body cameras. And so those things are in place because of something that happened from a community standpoint, saying we want to be able to record things, record those engagements and have those to protect them and to protect us as well. So it's a matter of continuing to have those relationships, continue to have those conversations, and then coming back to the community. Another thing that we also hear a lot is we need more mental health components. And so one of the newer things that our department has done is they have a mental health response team. So when there is a crisis or an issue going on, it's not always, let's show up and do heavy policing. It's how can we serve? We have a mental health response team where we can send them out and work with our people who need just some assistance, some guidance to be talked down and to do it correctly. So those policies are always being adhered to, listened to, applied, adapted. And then again, we got to continue to work with and in our legislative reform. So what are our senators saying? What are they doing? And what are some of the small barriers? Even if we're not talking like big pie in the sky, what are some of the small things that we can remove as far as just things that happen? So a young man or young woman doesn't have a driver's license. How can we get that taken care of? Their personal wallet was stolen. They don't have a social security card. Now they can't get employment. They can't work. Those are some barriers that are easily removed when you have the right resources in front of you. So it's just a matter of doing that outreach to tackle some of those small problems.
Right on, right on. So when you think about, now let's tackle this whole thing in terms of accountability. And so just like, how would you suggest that we move down that road to strengthen accountability? I personally feel that you can't have a total check and balance system and be the police and police yourself totally. I think there has to be an outside, a strong community component that helps to marriage that internal piece. But I think we're missing this whole accountability. I don't think a citizen review board is strong enough. I don't think so. I think it has to have some meat and some a stick strong enough with consequences. Because I think, just like we witnessed, the world witnessed George Floyd, where you had several officers watching that. So what part of that culture that would entangle them to sit and watch somebody die and not intervene to stop a fellow officer from killing someone? That's pretty heavy in terms of just. But I think Ricky, what we saw in the testifying of officers and chief of police, they said, you know what, that is not even close to what we train, what we practice, not part of our culture, policy. So I think that was refreshing to see officers stand up, and all my friends that are officers, every single one of them, that was not policing that took place there. But then across the board, Ricky, how do we begin to, because I think it cleans up itself if you can create a culture that, Ricky, I'm not gonna let you do wrong by this citizen just because you have a gun in your hand and a badge. Talk to me, man.
So that's exactly it. We can't drop the ball when it comes to being accountable or holding law enforcement accountable. Nowadays, everybody has a camera. And so when you see an incident, you witness an incident of one, you got to let those officers do their job. But two, stick around and give a report. Go back to the precinct and file a report. Tell what that officer did, what you seen, what you heard, what you witnessed, and provide your cell phone footage so that way it can be investigated. You're right. We do have a citizens advisory committee or review board. And what people don't know is it's open. So you, as a regular community member, you can get involved with that and say, these are the things that I'm seeing in my community. Why are we being so heavily stopped at this area, or what's going on? And then those are explanations and conversations that need to be had. If you feel like you're not getting the protection that you need, you know, why is my neighborhood not well lit? What can I do to get some more lighting on my streets, more security, those kind of things? Those are conversations that need to be had. So when you talk about accountability, it also falls on our shoulders to follow through. So if you see something, you got to say something, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even if it's breaking the law, and even if it's the officers who are breaking the law, if you see something, you got to say something. You got to talk to some of the local attorneys that are here who take on those cases, who will file and follow up. And your local leaders. The Empowerment Network is a great place to come to our weekly meeting. Every Wednesday, we meet with law enforcement and we get great reports on some of the policing that's going on in our city, but also they provide us with information on some of the community outreach that they're doing, some of the positive things that they're doing. So that way we know it's not just, and when you speak with Schmatter, he's going to say, you can't just arrest your way out of situations. That's not how he believes in policing.
Right.
And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, you're so right in terms of just you cannot arrest your way out of this, and I think I mean you made some very valid points in terms of just what can we do as citizens to help to do our part in this, and but one of the things I must say, Ricky, as a black man. If officers are out there watching this morning, you know, we need you. We need each other. We need a police force that looks like us, that reflects really the values and morals and the principles that we all should live by in terms of just really enforcing laws equally across the board. And so I think, you know, we're not saying, I don't hear the empowerment saying, hey, that there's nothing in the conversation about defunding the police. I just think we really just need to look at how do we strengthen what's happening, create more accountability across all systems, and figure out a way we can talk to each other. And it seems to me, Ricky, as a black man, I think, you know, police officers, particularly we're talking about black men now, black men and white men need to have a conversation. Because if it's driven based on just fears, misunderstanding, and assumptions that just because I stop a black man, or even as a black man, my assumptions too, you know, that a police officer is behind me, and based on history and things like that, I start sweating, man. This head just starts breaking out with sweat.
We know we getting pulled over.
Yeah, and you know, and Ricky, it's kind of unfortunate, man, but I have officers, retired officers, that get stopped still today, and they have that same anxiety. Something is wrong with that. Mm-hmm. That's why I love that they implemented having mental health teams, but they also we need to have a mental health team in terms of just black people and black men particularly. You talk about the trauma that this country has put us through because of just some of the things and practices. Now that we have cameras, like you said, body cameras, we see more. Just imagine when we couldn't see nothing. So we're going to take a short break, and if after we come back, Ricky, give us like one or two things in terms of what people can do to help make this thing better. Okay, we'll come back. Ricky Smith, give us some tips on what you can do to help this situation become better. Hey man, I can't believe it. We're out of time already, but just real quick, Ricky, action steps. How can people engage? A lot of people out there want to help, man. They want to help. I believe we're at a point of empathy where people they see it, they want to be a part of solutions. How can they be a part of solutions?
So it's really important that we are engaged as a community. So make sure that we are at the table having those discussions and conversations. When you look at elections, for example, the number of people who put their name in the hat to come and be voices for change. And so it's utilizing our voice and knowing how the system works. It's not just enough to know your rights, but it's know how to exercise your right. So it's documentation, it's contacting your local politicians, it's getting an attorney when you have to go to court instead of going there and pleading guilty. Make sure the system works for you. And then again, like I said, it's that community engagement component. Us as a community, we have to reach out the same way that the first responders are reaching out to us and leaning on us. When I look at my phone and the number of contacts that I have that are law enforcement, and when something happens, they call me and say, Ricky, what do you think? Or Ricky, can you come down here and engage some of the people? We're here as well. That's an authentic partnership and a working relationship that has to continue. When you also look at our young people, we have to break that cycle of family and generational curses, and that school to prison pipeline has to stop. We have to engage our kids when they're at school.
That's right on, right on. Man, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. And I tell you, I'm going to challenge your organization. I think we need an independent commission that will look at police reform for the greater Omaha area. And I think it should be led by 360, pulling people, you already got people at the table. And so let's get it done. Hey, that's all the time I have for this episode of Heartland Focus. Make today the beginning of your best year yet. Wear your mask, social distance, wash your hands. Do what it takes to be good to yourself. It makes it so much easier to be good to others when you take the time to be good to self. I'm out.